Plot summary of Bodega Dreams by Ernesto Quiñones. The story's narrator, Julio Mercado, starts by talking about his best friend Sapo, who likes to get into trouble and is street smart. Both of them grew up in the dangerous New York City neighborhood of Spanish Harlem, also called El Barrio. Julio's high school was a harsh place where white teachers made Latinx students feel bad about themselves and where immigrant teachers tried to help the students but didn't have much power. Sapo had quit school by the 8th grade, and Julio was going to a more competitive school downtown. Julio is now a college student who is married to Blanca, the girl he had a crush on when he was younger. Julio thinks back to the time when Sapo brought him together with a man named Willie Bodega. Julio says that he was attracted to Bodega's ideas and hopes for making the Latinx community in Spanish Harlem stronger. Blanca, who is pregnant, doesn't trust Sapo and Bodega, and whenever Julio goes with Sapo to meet Bodega, she fights with him. Sapo often asks Julio to keep packages for him that he thinks contain drugs. When Julio and Bodega meet for the first time, Bodega tells Julio that he has big plans for the neighborhood. He wants to buy all the property in Spanish Harlem so that Latinos can live there for cheap. All he wants in return is for people to be loyal to him. Bodega used to be a young lord activist, but City Hall stopped him from making the community stronger through the law. Bodega then started moving heroin to get money for smuggling guns and other things. Now, he is working with a lawyer named Edwin Nazario to use illegal means to fund his activist dreams. Bodega wants Julio to put him in touch with Blanca's Aunt Vera, who lives in Miami with her rich Cuban husband and is Blanca's sister. Since he was a teen, Bodega has been in love with Vera, and he wants her back. In exchange, Bodega offers Julio a cheap rent on a nice apartment in one of his buildings. Julio is tempted by the offer, but he doesn't take it because he's afraid of Blanca's anger. But when Blanca and Julio talk about baby names that night, Julio changes his mind. He wants Blanca and the baby to have a nice place to live, so he agrees to help Bodega meet Vera. That night, Blanca finds a lease for their new apartment under their door, which Bodega had put there. Blanca is mad that Julio didn't talk to her about moving, but she's also busy looking for a husband for her friend Claudia, who needs a green card badly. The next day, Julio and Sapo go to see Nazario and Bodega. While there, they hear Nazario and Bodega talking about a man named Alberto Salazar. When Bodega and Julio talk, Bodega is sure that once he sees Vera again, he'll marry her. He tells Julio that he and Vera were in love when Bodega was a young activist with high hopes, but Vera's mother made her marry a rich man instead. Julio and Blanca move into their new apartment the next day. As they are moving in, a TV news report says that an undercover reporter named Alberto Salazar has been killed in Spanish Harlem. When Julio hears that Salazar's body was found with a bite mark on one shoulder, he freezes. Julio thinks back to his school days with Sapo, who bites his opponents when they fight. Julio talks about a time when a teacher named Mr. Blessington made racist comments about Latinx culture, which led to a fight between Sapo and him. During the fight, Sapo bit Mr. Blessington on the shoulder and tore a piece of flesh off of him. When the police arrived, a Latinx teacher named Mr. Tapia came in and told Sapo to act like he heard voices because no one would believe that Mr. Blessington had provoked Sapo. Sapo didn't go to juvenile hall for the rest of the year, but instead went to counseling. Eventually, he stopped going to school. Back in the present, Blanca is worried that Sapo killed Salazar after hearing about the bite mark on his body, but Julio puts her mind at ease. The next day, Nazario meets Julio and tells him that Sapo is safe and won't get in trouble with the law because he has gone into hiding. Everyone in Nazario's neighborhood is nice to him because they know he is friends with Bodega, whose good deeds have spread through the neighborhood. Julio goes with Nazario to meet the owner of a salsa museum. There, Julio finds out that Bodega paid for the daughter of the museum owner to go to medical school. Nazario says that he wants to create a strong, educated, middle-class army to help the Latinx people of New York get out of poverty. When they get back to Julio's, Bodega is waiting for them and is very nervous. They go to Vera's high school reunion. Bodega wants Julio to tell Vera that he's waiting outside in a very expensive car. Julio thinks that Vera looks more like a rich white woman than a Latinx immigrant when he meets her. Julio tells Vera that he is married to Blanca and that William Irazari, Bodega, is waiting outside for her. Then, Julio, Vera, and Bodega get into Bodega's car and drive off to see his buildings. Vera is happy to see that Bodega is doing so well. Later that day, Bodega and Vera show up at Julio's apartment drunk and giddy, talking about when they were young and in love. Bodega takes Vera's engagement ring off and gives it to Julio, saying he'll buy Vera a bigger one himself. Blanca is upset about the ring when she gets home. She thinks it's wrong to keep it. Julio and Blanca have a big fight about Blanca's Pentecostal beliefs, which Julio thinks have made her believe stupid things. Julio surprises Blanca at her church later that day. He feels bad about it, so she is glad he came. A young man named Roberto Vega is about to be ordained. Julio tries not to laugh as Roberto gives an animated sermon in which he calls the women in the church whore and prostitute over and over again while they swoon over him like he's the Lord's stud. Julio is angry that people's faith makes them think it's okay to sit in filth now because they'll all have luxury in heaven. As Julio and Blanca walk home, they see that their building is on fire and that Nazario is there. Julio figures out that Aaron Fishman, a gangster, must have set fire to the building to get back at Salazar for killing him. After the fire is put out, people from Blanca's church help Julio and Blanca pack up the few things they still have and move to their new home, which Bodega finds for them right away. Blanca takes the job, even though she is worried that Julio is getting more and more involved in shady business. The next day, Nazario takes Julio to meet a mafia boss named Mr. Cavallari. Mr. Cavallari gives them permission to get back at Aaron Fishman. Bodega is missing, and it's likely because he is busy with Vera. On the way home, Nazario tells them that the United States got rich by lying to, stealing from, and killing Native Americans. Nazario thinks that Latinx people can't hide their crimes behind shaky laws, so they have to commit crimes, but in the end, it doesn't matter. Julio thinks about how poor Spanish Harlem is, where undocumented immigrants live next door to some of the richest people in the world, and he starts to support Bodega's cause. Roberto Vega and Blanca's friend Claudia are there to greet Julio when he gets home. Roberto, who is 17, and Claudia, who is 29, want to run away together. This is causing a lot of trouble. All of them persuade Roberto to talk to his mom before leaving town. Later that day, in the evening, Bodega tells Julio that he is going to talk to John Vidal, Vera's husband, the next day. Julio doesn't understand why Vera is telling Bodega to fight Vidal. The next day, Julio comes home to find Blanca and Pastor Velasquez sitting on the couch. Blanca wants Pastor Velasquez to talk Julio out of his criminal ways. The doorbell rings at that very moment, and two detectives named Ortiz and De Jesus want to talk to Julio about Sapo's role in Salazar's death. Julio says he doesn't know anything to protect Sapo, which makes Blanca angry. Captain Leary, the lead investigator, comes to the police station to talk to Julio. He seems bored, so he lets Julio go home without asking him many questions. Blanca has gone to stay with her mother when Julio comes home. Julio is scared that she won't come back, so he calls her to tell her how much he misses her. The next day, Julio is sad and feels lost. He runs into Sapo and, against his better judgment, agrees to go with him to the restaurant where Bodega will talk to Vidal. Bodega and Vera walk in, and Bodega makes a big deal out of making Vera tell Vidal that she's leaving him. Vidal insults Vera, and Bodega lunges for Vidal. Suddenly, someone shoots a gun. Vera killed Vidal, and now she can't stop crying. Bodega thinks quickly and calls Nazario. Julio thinks that Bodega is lost when he tells him that he will take the blame for the murder. Bodega turns around as he walks away and calls Julio his brother. Bodega is shot and killed in the street the next day. Julio is heartbroken. Nazario tells the police that Bodega killed Salazar and Vidal to protect the other people who were involved in their deaths. Later, Blanca goes back home because she is worried about Julio's sadness over Bodega. They make up. Just then, Negra, Blanca's sister, knocks on the door. She wants to talk to Julio about something. It turns out that Vera didn't love Bodega, she loved Nazario the whole time. Julio realizes all of a sudden that Nazario and Vera came up with this plan to get rid of Bodega and take his money. Julio calls Ortiz and De Jesus to tell them that Nazario was behind everything, even though it hurts him to do so because he doesn't trust the police. The funeral for Bodega lasts for 3 days. Everyone in the neighborhood comes out, and they all talk about how Bodega helped them. This brings them together because they all had the same experiences with Bodega. Sapo tells Julio that he's leaving for a while and gives him a hug. As always, he tells Julio that they are like brothers. Julio thinks that Sapo could be the one who ends up with Bodega's money, which makes him laugh. Julio goes up to Nazario at Bodega's funeral and says that he knows everything. Nazario looks like he wants to kill Julio. All of a sudden, Ortiz and De Jesus come up behind Nazario and arrest him. As Nazario is being taken away, he yells to Julio that Sapo should contact him if he needs help when he takes over. Julio runs into an old man and his grandson as he walks home. They just got off a plane from Puerto Rico and are looking for Bodega in New York. Julio tells them that there isn't a Bodega, but that he'll help them instead, and he offers to take care of them until they can get back on their feet. Julio has a dream that night. In his dream, Bodega knocks on the door and leads Julio to the window. From the outside, Spanish Harlem is doing well. There are murals of Bodega all over the streets. People are happy and hopeful, and maybe for the first time in their lives, they think that things can change. Julio realizes that Bodega is dead, but that his dream is still alive.
About the author. Ernesto Quiñones was born in Ecuador. When he was 18 months old, his parents moved to the United States. He grew up in Spanish Harlem. His mother was a Jehovah's Witness, and his father was a committed communist. Bodega Dreams was Quiñonez's first book, which came out in 2000. Critics called it an instant classic because of how well it showed how rough the streets of Spanish Harlem were and how it showed how Latinx immigrants were mistreated. The next 2 books by Quiñonez, Chango's Fire, 2004, and Taina, 2019, also got a lot of praise from critics for their realistic portrayals of immigrant life and Quiñonez's biting critiques of urban politics, especially the way gentrification affects people of different races. Quiñonez has said that he writes because of his own experiences as an immigrant who grew up in a poor neighborhood and because he wants to be a role model for other Latinos who want to become writers. Quiñonez is also a well-known public essayist, and he is a professor at Cornell University at the moment.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.